Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the Author Journey. The Author Journey airs live every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And we're very, very happy today to be celebrating the launch coming up this Friday of Francene Cosman's Nurse, a memoir. And very excited to have Francene with us here today. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Francene, and then I'm going to bring her up to join me. So, emerging from a challenging and dysfunctional early childhood, Francene was determined to be strong and achieve goals that included continuing education and a career. She chose nursing and entered the 3-year program at the St. John General Hospital in New Brunswick. After graduation in 1962, she enrolled in a 6-month postgrad at the Margaret Haig Hospital in Jersey City, across from the lights of Manhattan. I love Manhattan. Her social conscience was awakened and she participated in the Black Civil Rights Movement, joining in marches to support the cause of freedom and equality. At the age of 22, she returned to New Brunswick and became the night supervisor of the obstetrical service, the delivery rooms, postpartum floor, and the nursery of the St. John General Hospital. Later, marriage took her to Fredericton and the Victoria Public Hospital, where she worked in the case room. Following a move to Nova Scotia, she worked in the former Grace Maternity Hospital in the case room, and later became the head nurse on the postpartum floor. After the birth of her second daughter, she retired. From nursing, that is. Nursing provided strong foundational skills that underpinned future political involvement. A long political career ensued, first as a county councillor, then the first mayor of Bedford, Nova Scotia. She was appointed president of the Provincial Status of Women, and 4 years later, she chaired the task force on the concerns of women and became the executive director of the Liberal Party. In 1993, she was elected to the Nova Scotia legislature and became deputy speaker. In her second term of office, she was appointed to Executive Council as Minister of Community Services, Minister for the Civil Service, and Minister of the Status of Women. She served 6 years on the Board of Governors of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. She is currently the curator of the Scott Manor House in Bedford, enjoys painting, and still speaks out on community issues. And very recently, she was awarded the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal. Quite an honor, considering, recognizing the passing of the Queen. And without further ado, I wanted to give you all of that background because this is an impressive woman, and I'm very, very fortunate to be working with her to get her memoir out. I'm going to bring Francene up to join us. Here we go. Hi, Francene.
Hello, Anne.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well. And what a long and lucrative career you've had. And I just, I tried to cut it back, but there's just so much there, and just you've accomplished so much. I couldn't cut anything out.
Well, thank you for that. It is long.
No, I don't mind. And you know what? Just again, most recently, you're still very much involved in the community. You're such a community activist. And just a couple weeks ago, you were awarded the Queen's Jubilee Medal. I mean, considering again what we were just watching all over the news yesterday with the Queen's funeral, what does that mean for you?
Well, I really felt distinctly honored by being a recipient of the medal. I've never been in that situation before. A number of people in Nova Scotia received it for their community work, community heroes, they were called. And I think I've always loved the Queen since I was a 10-year-old brownie standing on a train station platform, screeching my lungs out when she had a visit. I have 4 different occasions with the Queen when I look back on it.
Wow.
And I just have huge affection for her. And I watched all the hours of the funeral and I cried all the way through. So yeah, I loved the Queen.
I think we found out together. We were chatting on a video chat, and I think a call came in from your daughter.
Yes.
Both of us found out at the same time, and it hit me a lot harder than I thought it would.
I know it's amazing because of the length of her life and her interaction as our Queen in Canada.
Mhm.
I think we always just sort of took her for granted that she was going to be there, even given her age at 96. We knew that couldn't happen, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, no, just a great role model for everybody, let alone women, you know. And
Mm.
I'm all about role models for women.
Absolutely. And you're an amazing role model and have accomplished so much. And we'll talk a little bit about, other things, but today, your accomplishment that we're celebrating is the publishing of your memoir that
Yeah,
comes out this Friday.
yeah,
And I'm so excited. And we kind of put a little push on this one, didn't we, to get it
yeah,
out in
yeah,
time
we did.
for your 60th class reunion. Like, how crazy is that?
Well, it sounds pretty long, doesn't it? And yeah, and I'm thinking, well, we've got a hurricane coming maybe on the weekend, and yeah, and I'm driving over to New Brunswick, so hopefully with a box full of dry books.
Yes,
And yeah, it's been a wonderful set of women that trained together, and we're still very bonded.
oh,
That is one thing that that nursing career in a school of nursing gave us. We bonded as a sisterhood, and
right.
we're still in touch and still supporting one another after all those years. I mean, that's a remarkable thing in itself.
That's incredible, and at the back of the book, there are some photos, and, it looks as though you guys had a lot of fun. You worked really hard, but you had a lot of fun as well. I'm just gonna show this can you see that picture?
Oh yes, the one on the bottom. Yeah, we partied at times.
Just a little bit of party. So, uh, share with us, what was it at this stage in your life that motivated you to write your memoir of this particular period in time of your life? Because you've accomplished so much, but this is a snippet from your years at nursing training.
Well, Anne, I nibbled away at writing this for quite a long time. I'd pick it up, I'd write, I'd put it down, and I started to see how history was changing so drastically in the area of nursing and history in the area of St. John, New Brunswick.
Mhm.
And I watched my School of Nursing get imploded, the St. John General Hospital. I watched my church that I was married in get torn down. I
Um,
watched one of the schools I attended get torn down.
mm,
Shops that I was so familiar with torn down. And I love history.
mm,
It's so important that we don't forget our collective history, let alone our individual history.
mhm,
And there's always something new from the old, and there's always something to be learned.
mhm,
So it became more important to me to capture that history, which I think in the book I'm capturing mostly nursing history,
mhm.
but I'm also taking a look at what was in St. John, the tenements, the slums, the brothels, the this, the that. So I encompassed it into that story mainly because I'm a believer in history and the way it leaves its mark. And if we don't record it, we will never know it or have it to learn from. So
Mhm.
COVID came along. I had more free time, of course, because I was stuck in the house. And I'm not that great on a computer, but I thought it's time, and I'm not getting any younger. So it was time to finally capture it and work with you and make a book.
Well, I have to say, when you think about this is your 60th class reunion, doesn't take much to do the math, and you certainly don't look your age. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Well, I am 81, so there you go.
I wasn't going to say it before you did. Well, an incredible book, and when it came to me, it was one of those situations where and after we spoke, it was a no-brainer. I had to work with you to help you get this out. So talk a little bit about why you think it's important, aside from the historical perspective of this. There's a lot of, like you said, detail in this book about the training that you went through, and we know things are difficult in healthcare right now. So in your mind, why is it important to share this piece of your history?
Well, we had a distinctly different kind of nurses training. It was very hands-on, experiential. And we took our studies were done in blocks of time,
Mhm,
and then we might be 4 hours in a classroom, but the rest of the day we'd be on the wards working and learning and being supervised by either one of our educators or by a head nurse.
mhm,
So from the very after 4 weeks of time or so, we were on the floors working with a live patient, not a wax dummy or a rubber doll. And I think we built on that over the 3 years, learning more and more levels of responsibility about nursing. And at the end of that time, we came out of our training and graduated fully prepared to step into the role of a professional registered nurse the day after we graduated
mhm,
and to take on huge responsibilities on the wards of any hospital. We were trained on all the various areas of a hospital.
mhm,
Um, I don't know today if that's the case. I've heard it isn't the case, but I could be corrected.
mhm,
And I think our nurses could go anywhere in the world in those days based on their training
mhm,
and take up their profession.
mhm,
So through COVID, I've been watching the number of emergency rooms that had to shut down for lack of staff, the nurses being required to work more and more overtime because their other members were ill with COVID, and the constant stories I've been told from nurses in their profession currently working
mhm,
about the crisis in healthcare and the crisis in nursing and how we can't get enough people in to train them. And it's a 4 year process with a degree.
mhm,
So all of this accumulated in my own mind that it is time to look at the model we're currently using and to begin a discussion about saying, is that model actually working for two ways, for the nurse herself and for the patient? So I think that's one of my hopes, that coming out of this would be the beginnings of that discussion, because somehow we have to find our way back to having nurses who can function the minute they graduate.
mhm.
And we need to build those numbers up very, very soon. We're in a crisis with numbers.
So, and it's interesting because one of uh, the the things that stood out for me as I was reading the book is that there was something about your uniform when you started to go into the hospital wards
Yeah,
that let other nurses and doctors know where in your training you were,
yeah.
right?
And that was quite important. We went into training with a pinstriped blue and white dress, covered with a white apron as probationers, and we had black shoes and stockings. Very British model. But any doctor on any floor could look at me wearing that uniform and say, oh, she doesn't know very much yet. I'm not asking her a question.
Help.
So several months later, we achieved a cap, a plain white cap,
Mhm,
and a bib. That basically signals that student nurse knows more now, and it's okay to sort of put questions to her and find out about this or that. And
mhm,
as we progressed, our uniform was the signal.
mhm,
At one point, we had a bar pin. It said we were a second year student. Our third year, we got white shoes and white stockings. Just before graduation, we got a black velvet band on our cap.
mhm.
That black velvet band just
Meant
generated huge respect, you know. And
uh-huh,
the doctors, we were treated then just like we were fully registered, fully functioning like any hired professional nurse. So
mhm,
the layers of the uniform signaled a level of competence achieved.
mhm,
And all of a sudden, toward the end of my training, a political decision was made that new students coming in were going to wear an all white uniform.
mhm,
And basically, that saved money on laundry,
mm.
and nobody knew what those young women were not capable of doing when they showed up on the nursing units wearing an all white uniform, looking like they had 3 years or 4 years of training.
Right,
So
right.
that aspect, yeah, it was very distinctive.
Hmm. Now, of course, I don't remember in recent years seeing any of the hats anymore. Nurses don't wear those
Yeah.
hats. Probably when I was a kid, they did, but not anymore. And you know, this is a huge, can of worms, shall we say?
The
Um,
uniform,
what's that?
the
No,
non-uniform.
the whole issue of addressing the crisis, the shortage, and the increasing the numbers coming out of nursing training. And as you said, it would be wonderful if this book was able to help trigger conversation around creative ways of increasing you know the the pool of trained nurses that are available. But with your political background, you understand sort of the process and some of the red tape that could be required. Where does this conversation begin? And I'm sure it's already happening, um, but we don't really know to what extent. And the results
Yeah,
in a long time, right?
it's a huge
And,
it's a huge shift to even begin a dialogue,
mm,
because once you set up a system operating in a certain way, um, it becomes very owned, and
mhm,
nobody really wants to shake it up, because shaking it up means a big change in all likelihood.
right.
And that ownership, it's very hard to pry the fingers off of ownership.
Mhm.
So, having said that, it's still a very important thing to look at nurses training today. How do we speed the process up? And how do we provide training that means a young student could go on a floor of a hospital and work effectively without being terrified of the experience? And I'm hearing nurses are coming out of their degree and almost require a mentorship period of time just so they get comfortable in
Mhm.
their role as a professional nurse. So, but that's a luxury. Having to be mentored is a luxury. And I can only reflect on my own day. We
Mhm.
didn't have that because we didn't need it. Our
Mhm.
training was so complete in those 3 years. So I really want the dialogue to start to take place. And even if major changes don't occur, minor changes might tweak the current system. And
Mhm.
that's not bad. You
Yeah,
know,
no, I think that's a
putting it under a microscope is not bad.
good right. Well, and I mean, accreditation is a pretty lengthy process, and hospitals have accreditation, and universities and
Yeah.
programs. So it's not like they're not used to, addressing, being put under the microscope. But as you said, that ownership piece is probably the hardest one to shake loose,
Yeah.
right?
And the original changes going either to a 1 year university topping up of the 3 year program, or going to a bachelor's of science and nursing degree that was the 4 years. That just came out of the blue back
Yeah,
then.
right.
There was no involvement with the nursing staff or the
Mm,
student bodies of the day. It just was like behind closed doors of a cabinet room. It was bang and done. So I think I am a great believer in looking at how can we make it better.
mhm,
And given the crisis we have, I mean, we've got exhausted nurses everywhere, and it's got to be horribly tough for them, to do their job and get home and know that they've got another 12-hour shift ahead of them the next day.
and
And
new
I don't know how they're doing it.
right, new graduates coming into this kind of an environment that is like baptism by fire, literally, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I just want to give a shout out. Thanks, Sue, for watching. We have a couple of live viewers. That's very exciting. If anybody has questions for Francine, please feel free. Let's get back to the book, shall we?
yeah, yeah.
It's a really very fascinating read, and you really draw people right into your life and the experiences with vivid detail. What is the most vivid story from your training that you remember?
Oh boy, there's so many stories in there. But you and I were chatting before we went on live, and I agree with you in your comments. The most vivid story was the young woman who came in with a very early pregnancy, and it was a spontaneous loss of that pregnancy. And it was such an early period in the gestation that it what she passed or delivered did not have any recognizable human form
Mhm,
except for one thing. And the doctor delivered this little conceptus and asked me to go out of the delivery room with it and put a little green linen cloth over this tiny bowl. And I, being a Snoopy student, decided I was going to look under the cloth. And what I saw was a little human form with a heartbeat, not shaped like a baby, but a very rapidly beating heartbeat. And I remember sitting on a little wooden stool, tears streaming down my face, holding that bowl in my hands, watching that little heartbeat struggle and then eventually stop. But just before it stopped, as a student, we were allowed to baptize in the case of an emergency. And as a Christian student, I baptized that little beating heart. I still want to cry about it.
oh my gosh, it just
It's
how
poignant.
oh, but how amazing at that moment in time when you had that little heartbeat in your hands,
Yeah.
that you had the presence of mind to to, give it peace. I mean, that just I literally, of course, when I work on a book project, I read, the manuscript, and then I read the layout, and then I read the final. Every single time I read that part of the book, I had tears rolling down my face. So, yeah, I mean, I can only imagine.
I
Um,
can still see that in my mind's eye. You
mhm,
know, all those decades that have passed,
mhm.
I can still see it.
That's crazy, and it's really very beautifully written. Um, Was there I imagine that was very difficult to write. Was there any other parts of the book that you found hard to get down on paper?
Well, there
Really?
were quite a few, yes. I think of the Christmas Eve story in the
The
huge
snowstorm.
blizzard that blew through, and I was working in isolation with a young woman who came in with an undiagnosed high fever, and we did everything between the intern and myself. We did everything we could to try and treat her.
Mhm.
Double lines intravenously going into her with antibiotics, broad spectrum, not knowing again what was she dealing with. And she was 19 years old and she had just gotten engaged in time for Christmas. She had a new
Oh,
diamond ring on her finger.
how
Yeah, and I thought nobody's going to be able to get in through this blizzard to bring the night shift on, and I was fully prepared to stay. It was Christmas Eve,
Mhm.
but a nurse came in early for her shift, so um, as this young woman's temperature continued to go higher and higher and higher, you know, and we had her packed in ice and tried to cool her down. And finally, I said to the intern, we've got to get her family, and that might make the difference. And we had to call the police to give them an escort to get to the hospital through the snow. But I went home and had to come back the next morning on shift, well, afternoon, and she had died in the night.
Mm.
And that's always stayed with me, the poignancy of that experience, and just a young girl not ever going to get out of the hospital and have her wedding.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Heartbreaking. And so
yeah.
you're bringing these memories back, and that's always the thing with writing memoir is, you're delving into your past life and bringing back memories that maybe sometimes aren't, you know, aren't calming or soothing.
No, no, they're not. But you experience those times and you grow from them, oddly enough. Um, I think every bit of nurses training is a growth process because you accumulate layers of knowledge and experiences and joy and not joy. So, there were times when we did things that, yeah, we stole away on an ambulance and that's sort of a joyride, but
That's actually kind of a comical scene until you got where the ambulance was going.
yes, that's
Like,
right.
no
Yeah,
spoilers, no spoilers.
yeah, no spoilers.
Have to buy the book. Is there anything, you'd like to share, like, before we wrap up that we might not have touched on?
Oh, that's a hard question, Anne. I think every one of our lives, from the time we're born till the time we die, every one of our lives is touched by a nurse's hands at some point. And nursing's just a wonderful profession, and we should be so proud of our nurses. And I
Mhm,
want us to be.
mhm,
So I just think reading the book, it's a look past, it's a look hoping for some changes in the future. And I'm really happy I did this.
me
Yes,
too.
I'm old, but I did it.
I think it's wonderful. And just before we started our broadcast, I looked at Amazon and we're launching on Friday, as I said, and it's already trending at number 37 in medical biographies. And that's huge. Think about the millions of books on Amazon right now, number 37 in medical biographies. So if you're watching and you're thinking you want to read Francine's memoir, I'm going to show you this. The links are on the website, and you can read more about Francine on the OC Publishing website. Get in there, pre order your copy, and help us get to a hot new release, number one. And we'll, uh, we'll keep you posted. Francine, thank you so much for sharing your story and for joining me today. And we'll definitely have you back another time to talk more about Nurse, that's flying off the shelves. Oh, upside down. There we go.
It's going off so fast, it's upside down. Thank you, Anne. You're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll be in touch and we'll talk really soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me today on the author journey. And make sure that you head to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or your favorite online retailer and pre order your copy of Nurse. We'll put it up right way this time, a memoir. And join us again next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. for the author journey. We're here every week and we love to hear from you. If anybody is watching and has comments, please feel free to fill them in on the underneath the broadcast, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So bye for now, and we'll see you next week on the author journey.